Welcome back to another episode of Taxpayer Empowerment. My name is Jose Melendez, Campaign Director at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and today I'm joined here at the Texas GOP Convention by Representative Mitch Little, who's a taxpayer champion, one of the leading voices at the Capitol. Representative Little, welcome to the show.
I'm so glad to be here with you here at convention. It's been a good week so far.
Fantastic. I want to jump into one of the new interim charges that we've seen come out from the Texas House. So it goes to a new committee that was created by the Speaker, the Governmental Oversight Select Committee. And one of these charges gets at, waste, fraud, and abuse at the local level. It's safeguarding taxpayer funds. What are we trying to address here?
Yeah. One of the things that is endemic, Jose, with cities in our state, and when I say cities, I mean Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, is what I'll call NGO or non-governmental organization money laundering. In a lot of these cities, what's happening is taxpayer funds are being essentially laundered to nonprofits to carry out the political ends of the Democrat opposition in Texas. And what that looks like is the homeless industrial complex in Austin, Texas. It looks like sending taxpayer money to defend illegal immigrants in places like Houston and Dallas. The list goes on and on and on. I saw, even in Austin, Texas, I saw something recently that essentially the city council men and women are allowed to pick where their taxpayer money can go from a nonprofit standpoint. I saw a transfer of $15,000 to Fellowship of Christian Athletes in Austin, Texas, to promote tourism in the state, in the city of Austin.
Sure.
I love the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I've given to it for a long time, but taxpayer money shouldn't be going to nonprofits. It should be going to the core mission of cities, which is to keep us safe.
Yeah, so when the public thinks of waste, fraud, and abuse, they usually think about Washington, D.C., but they need to start thinking closer to home, right? So when you look at Texas local governments, what are some vulnerabilities that we have? What are some examples you're seeing out there? In fact, my team at TPPF is currently doing a deep dive of all these cities, using a lot, looking for various examples of waste, fraud, and abuse. And you can literally spend most of your time, if not all your time, in just the city of Austin alone.
Oh, no doubt about it. And when you think about government and where money hides, we call it waste, fraud, and abuse, but it's just our opposition spending money against us. They're not really wasting it. They're just using taxpayer money to abuse us. And so in the context of a place like Houston, they've deployed a lot of nonprofit money, or a lot of taxpayer money to nonprofits in Houston to do things like election organizing, to track data on low propensity voters so they can turn them out to vote Democrat in Houston. And for the average Texan, they don't have time to sit down and parse a city budget. You need resources, research capability like Texas Public Policy Foundation provides in order to parse these things. They steal money from the taxpayer through what I call 1,000 tiny cuts.
Sure.
It's not one big thing where they send $100 million off to the Democrat Party. It's a lot more subtle than that.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind is shining a spotlight on what's going on, right, for the taxpayer. So more transparency is needed. What do you think are some of the obstacles that's preventing taxpayers from seeing what's actually going on in our local governments?
Does anybody read a city budget? You're looking for a needle in a stack of needles. And so our job, I think, in the legislature needs to be to control what I call the top of the funnel. So the taxpayer money comes into the city, and then the city funnels that money out to whatever the intended uses of the city are, whether it's police and fire, or if it's some nonprofit that doesn't advance the lives of the people who live in that city. We need to keep the money from going into the top of the funnel for organizations like that, whether it's for electioneering or defending illegals or like I said, the homelessness industrial complex that exists in Austin.
A lot of these local governmental entities, your cities, your school districts, your special districts, are charged with managing billions upon billions of dollars. What are some reforms you might see next session that would address, what's happening there at the local level?
So there's a number of different ways that I think you can constrain it. That I think one legislative proposal might be to constrain or narrow the uses for which taxpayer money can be applied. So, like, for example, not sending money to nonprofits that are engaged in solving homelessness or whatever it is. What we're seeing in Austin, just to give you like one small example, is Austin spends an absolute boatload of money on homelessness, but what you see at the nonprofit level for the entities it sends the money to is they're making gigantic salaries. They're paying a ton of money to the people who run those organizations and who serve kind of bureaucratically within them, but they're not making a dent in the problem because the complex must exist for them to continue to make money off of it. So one way is to constrain the uses. Another way is to strengthen the manner through which they're approved, like requiring unanimous approval for those uses or whatever, or requiring voter approval for some uses like that. Just locking them down.
You make a very good point, right? When it comes to the homelessness spending side of things, we've seen the city of Austin and other local governments spend tons of money, throwing money at the problem. But it's seemingly, based on what we saw last year with Prop Q in the city of Austin, citizens are getting fed up, right? It's not that they don't care about the homeless. I think we all can be compassionate and care about the homeless, but they also care about using those monies wisely. And I don't think that's been the case.
They don't even know the half of it. I mean, I think when you talk about Prop Q and the failure of Prop Q, the people who live in the city of Austin know that they've had enough in terms of being taxed. In my view, they just don't know the half of it. What we ought to require is, I think what the state of Texas legislature ought to require is to require those cities to publish the uses of that cash in terms of their nonprofits to the public, so there's more transparency. So it requires some form of separate publication so that the people of Austin know this is where our money's being applied. This is where it's all going from a nonprofit standpoint. And I'm passionate about trying to curb these NGO uses because it's just not why people pay taxes. And it's a complex form of patronage in my mind.
You know, when we attempt to shine more a spotlight on what's going on, we seek public information requests. And a lot of times they get away with shielding that information through legal loopholes that exist. When you think about what can be done there, what are some reforms that we can use to tackle that so we can create more transparency?
I think, Jose, almost every governmental organization is doing this from a public record standpoint. I think one thing that we could do as the state of Texas is to do what some other states have done and increase the penalties on cities for failure to comply with public records requests. Because, the attitudes of lawyers is, I'm not going to give it to you. And, well, if you're going to sue me to go get them, well, I'm just going to fence you off for as long as I can before I have to deal with the problem. One way to do it is a per-day penalty for failure to produce items. Other states have done that. It's something the state of Texas ought to look at because we're seeing abuses of the taxpayer. They shield the uses or conceal it within a gigantic budget, and then when you ask for specific information, they fence you off in the public records world.
Absolutely. And so as we wrap up here, what does success look like next session when it comes to safeguarding taxpayer funds?
Yeah, I think we need to look at a re-examination of the property tax system. We need to be looking at reforms there. And whenever anybody talks to me about property taxes, I always tell them you have to control all three levers of the process. Government spending, one lever. Another lever is the rates, the M&O rates themselves. And then another lever still is the property tax appraisal process. Unless you've got control of all three of those levers, you're bailing one bucket of water out of the front of the boat while you dump another one in the back. It's just we've got to get that under control. From a city standpoint, I've heard really good ideas about restricting the ability of cities to continue to incur debt. Like I know the governor's proposed one thing. It's like we need a higher threshold of voter approval to approve bond issuances, things like that. Anything we can do to constrain government spending, we need to get to work on as Republicans.
Well, to your first lever, local government spending is out of control. And one thing I think about is the state has limitations on spending. If it's good enough for the state, why shouldn't it be good enough for local governments?
Well, look at the school district in Austin. What's the deficit at Austin ISD right now? It's over $100 million. Last time I think I saw this week $180 million deficit budget that they're passing. How does a school district pass a $180 million deficit budget? Like there need to be greater constraints on these entities. Their independence is only subject to the legislature's willingness to allow them to run deficit budgets, and we need to stop doing that.
The craziest part that I would add before we finish here is that because they see this tax reform session coming up in 2027, a lot of them are trying to sneak these bonds.
Yeah, they're trying to get their licks in now, right?
You saw in Dallas a $6.2 billion bond package Dallas ISD passed, while enrollment is completely declining.
Yeah, there are so many perverse incentives that are associated with that, Jose. Who's really behind the bond packages? Is it the teachers in Dallas ISD? No, it's not. It's the lawyers. It's the construction companies.
The architects, the engineers.
The system of people that feed at that trough.
Yeah, it's the powers, those special interests against your average Joe.
No doubt.
These bond elections.
No doubt, and they're powerful. And they're powerful.
Absolutely. Representative Little, thank you so much for joining the show. Thank you for being a taxpayer champion.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this again.
Absolutely.
Right.
That'll do it for this episode of Taxpayer Empowerment. We'll see you next time.